Well, many of these questions would probably be best suited for legislative counsel, but it does specify that the program is to be operated in accordance with the Green Act as of January 1st, 2015. And if we go to Ed Code, we see that the Green Act is quite specific as to how the program is to operate. It specifies things such as grant amounts and what it takes to qualify. So the state allocation board could theoretically or may be able to modify certain types of regulations as long as they're not in conflict with the statute.
And if this initiative passes, what is the projected debt service for all of the infrastructure bonds that the state has authorized? Do we have any idea about that?
The annual debt service?
For not just the school bonds, but for everything, yes.
So next year the governor projects that the debt service will be about $5.3 billion. So this $500 million would bring that up to about $5.8.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members? Okay, thank you very much. The next panel will be the Department of Finance, who will. I appreciate their being here. We're in the middle of a budget season, and I know everybody's busy. So we have Chris Ferguson and Jeff Bell.
Madam Chair, Chris Ferguson with the Department of Finance. Our comments will be primarily focused on the school facilities program. Over the past 2 years, the administration has noted significant shortcomings associated with the current school facilities program. As an example, what was intended to be a relatively easy process for school districts and local educational agencies to utilize has become overly complex. It started out with roughly 30 pages in regulations, and today there are 130 pages of regulations. This has led to a very complex process and costly process for both the state and local entities to navigate. Also, the program is predicated on a first-come, first-served funding allocation that creates a disadvantage for small school districts that don't have dedicated facilities personnel with which to navigate that process, disadvantaging them in the multi-state agency plan approval process. Lastly, the administration has raised concerns with continued reliance on debt service and debt issuance as the financing mechanism for this program. As the LAO noted, we are currently paying over $2.6 billion per year to fund debt service associated with recently issued school facilities bonds. Continuing to pass bond after bond will at some point crowd out the ability of the general fund to fund other competing interests such as education and non-education priorities and needs through the general fund. Since the inception of the current program in 1998, the state has experienced an unprecedented level of debt issuance for school facilities. In total, approximately $35 billion has been approved in general obligation bonds for state assistance towards school facility construction. At the same time, Proposition 39 of 2000 was also passed, which enabled local entities to more easily pass local voter-approved bonds with a 55% threshold. From November 2002 through November 2013, over $68 billion in locally approved general obligation bonds were approved by voters. Recently, the 2015-16 and 2016-17 governor's budget presented guiding principles to shape the development of a new program. The administration recommended that the financial support for a future program move away from state debt issuance and instead be limited to supporting facilities investments for schools with the greatest needs. The governor's budget recommended that state funding should be targeted towards districts with the lowest per student assessed values. Prioritizing state funding to low wealth districts would have ensured that all districts have similar access to funding for school facilities. The governor's budget also recommended prioritizing health and safety projects. Once eligible projects would have been identified, the state share of those projected costs would have been based on a sliding scale that accounted for the assessed value within the local educational agency's area. Given that the funding would have been in this construct targeted towards districts most in need, the governor's budget recommended exploring a number of tools to assist local educational agencies in these endeavors. For example, school districts today are able to issue debt up to 1.25% of their local assessed value within their region for a non-unified district and 2.5% of the assessed property value within their region for a unified school district. Another tool that, and within that, current law, as you may be aware, also stated that there were caps on the property tax valuation that could also be issued for non-unified districts. That was approximately $30 per $100,000 in assessed value and $60 per $100,000 in assessed value for unified school districts. These are the types of tools that we could have looked at as partnering with local educational agencies to issue and to provide them with tools to issue local general obligation bonds to support school facilities construction. In addition to general obligation bonds, the governing board of any school district may currently levy developer fees to help cover the cost of new construction of school facilities due to housing developments within their districts. There are three categories that determine the amount of fees a district can levy, which range from a fraction of project cost to 100% of the project costs. The administration believed that a new program could have been designed in a way that meets California's school facilities needs, but in a fiscally responsible way to protect the state's future well-being, financial well-being. And I think certainly these are all predicated on, we believe the bond initiative certainly does include language to have the Leroy Green School Facilities Program operate as it did as of January 1st, 2015. And there's also similar language relative to developer fees within the initiative.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members? So if the initiative fails, what do you see as the future of the state school facilities program?
I think if the initiative were to fail from the administration's perspective, we would engage stakeholders in a continued conversation regarding school facilities construction. But at this time, we wouldn't have a specific proposal that we would look at.
Okay. Oh, Assemblymember Medina.
Senator Liu, in looking at the bond, the amounts of money allocated, can you say a little bit about how the $2 billion for community college facilities was arrived at?
So we were not the authors of this initiative, so we can't necessarily speak to why the proponents chose $2 billion for community colleges and $7 billion for local educational agencies. We would have to defer to the proponents.
Assemblymember Baker.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the position on what are districts in need and understand a little bit better, particularly if the school facilities bond doesn't pass. And from what I'm hearing from your remarks is that the schools that are considered in need would be ones, perhaps the median income nearby would be lower. Can you talk a little bit more about how you would identify what those districts in need are?
Certainly. I think what the governor's budget had proposed looking at was looking at assessed value and using that on a sliding scale to determine the wealth of a particular district relative to other districts in the state, so that any available state resources would have been distributed using that methodology. But in concert with that, we also would have looked at and investigated local tools such as the assessed valuation caps that are 1.25% and 2.5% to enhance and assist locals in constructing school facilities.
So in a district that may have extraordinarily high growth of student population, say, and in a very expensive property value area where the home values are higher, cost of living is higher, and the demand is very great because of the sheer number of students that are in that school district, and new property is needed that is extremely expensive, perhaps multiple millions of dollars for an acre of land for a new school, would that be considered a district in need under what you're identifying? And if not, what would you say to those districts and those students who are in need of new facilities?
Hi, I'm Jeff Bell from Department of Finance. The conversations that we had when we were creating the categories for what we saw as reforms for the school facilities program. We hadn't really gotten drilled down into that level of specifics in the scenario that you're describing right now. So I think depending upon what happens in November and what scenario comes as a result of the votes, additional conversations would have to go forward before we could come with that specific of an answer for you.
I thank you, and I hope the bond passes. You won't find me as supporting bonds very often, but that is one I do support. If it doesn't, I hope that is the kind of granular detail that you will get into, and I'd be delighted to work with you on it, because there are districts in this state where the students, through no fault of their own, are in an area that is extremely expensive, and it simply isn't possible for a local community to be left on its own to fund new facilities, and they are in need. I hope they would be considered stakeholders, but hopefully we won't cross that bridge. Thank you.
And finally, does the administration believe that the state has a role in providing bond funding for schools?
You know, the conversations again about what the scenario would look like is kind of what Mr. Ferguson described as if we are in that role, this is something that's more focused on need-based, certainly a far greater role at the local level. And there were conversations that we had in the fall towards those efforts. Some of the proponents weren't willing to do some of the changes that we had hoped as part of that, and so as a result, that didn't happen, and we're where we are today.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Well, I thank the panel. Thank you very much. And our last panel, we have representatives from the sponsors of the initiative, Jenny Hanna, the chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, and Richard Lyon, Senior Vice President for the California Building Industry Association. And please join us, Mr. Walrod. Right. I know.
Madam Chair, my name is Dave Walrath. I'm with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. What I'll be doing is first introducing Jenny Hanna, the chair of the coalition. She will then introduce Mr. Lyon, our partner from the California Building Industry Association, for a couple of comments. Then it will come back to Chair Hanna for her conversation and more detail on the testimony about the bond. So with that, I would like to introduce Chair Jenny Hanna from Kern County for a couple of comments prior to Mr. Lyon and coming back.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, members. Am I on?
Here
okay,
you go.
There we go. Thank you. I'm here as chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, but I also represent the Kern County Superintendent of Schools. I have been a school facilities person for over 20 years, and I'm very knowledgeable about the process and the system and how the state program works. We are proponents here today to talk about the state bond for school facilities, but also I wanted to briefly mention that we are part of the education family. We believe as a whole that we support the other side of the house, the operations side of the house, with education. And so with that said, Proposition 30 extension and the state bond are both integral to our framework and what we support, and have been supported in our polling as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Richard Lyon. Richard represents Californians for Quality Schools as well as the California Building Industry Association, our proponent for the state bond, to give his comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. We're pleased to be here today, and thank you very much for holding the hearing. As Ms. Hanna has said, CBIA is a partner along with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing in support of the November bond measure. I want to talk to you a bit about why the program is important from the private sector side, from the home building side, and maybe get to some of the questions that have been asked here. Our members participate as active funding partners in the state school facility program, and in fact, home builders have been contributing to the financing of school facilities for nearly 40 years now, since the late 1960s. Back then, fees were paid on a case-by-case basis, on a city-by-city basis, And as a result, you had a patchwork of local measures that developed with little predictability and little uniformity. It was in the later 70s, in an effort to establish some predictability and uniformity, that the legislature enacted the School Facility Act of 1977. And among other things, the act established that builders, home builders, were responsible to pay fees to school districts to finance interim school facilities that were caused by new development. And I think, to quote Oscar Wilde, no good deed goes unpunished, I should say, and it wasn't long before the 77 Act ended up in litigation. The question was whether cities and counties, not school districts, could go beyond the 77 Act and demand fees against residential development to finance permanent facilities. And in response to that series of litigation, the legislature weighed in 1986 and said, yes, we were part of that solution in 1986. Then districts, by statute, were given exclusive authority to levy developer fees to finance permanent facilities. The amount of the fee was established at $1.50 a square foot. That has grown now to, I believe, about $3.48 a square foot. It's what we call the Level 1 fee. And importantly, the payment of that fee that was established in statute was supposed to demonstrate full and complete mitigation for the builder. Once again, the 1986 Act ended up in litigation with both the statutory fee limits and the full and complete mitigation provisions being subject to court battles. The litigation mills churned for over a decade before the legislature once again in 1998 stepped in to say enough is enough. Let's establish a program that gets schools built and offers some certainty and balance for the state's home building industry. The School Facility Act of 1998 became law, and we believe that it accomplished those goals. It established a successful financing structure that is in operation today and that the November bond carries forward. And the heart of the 1998 Act is a public-private partnership to ensure that in the growing areas of the state, which the Department of Finance, by its most recent data, identifies as 34 of the state's 58 counties, builders provide the private capital to leverage the public resources to ensure that classroom space to accommodate kids from new development is provided. And my purpose for doing this stroll down memory lane is not just to relive history, but it's to highlight that prior to 1998 and the establishment of the existing program, history was repeating itself. We had disputes over the obligation of new development. The legislature would step in to attempt to resolve the issues, and then that resolution by the legislature ended up in more litigation that caused the legislature to step in again, and it was this revolving cycle of that type of turmoil that was solved when the SB 50 program was put together. For the past nearly 18 years now, the action has shifted from the courtroom to the classrooms. New classroom space for over 1.3 million kids has been built since the program's inception, and over 3.4 million kids have benefited from the repair, replacement, and modernization of facilities under the program. That's nearly 5 million children in a total K-12 enrollment of a little over 6 million students. So we think that's a hallmark of a successful program. It's why we are pleased to join with our partner, the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, in support of this school bond. We thank you very much for the opportunity to provide our view on this, and we look forward, after Ms. Hanna, to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? I have Assemblymember Medina.
Thank you. Maybe this is the more appropriate group, and wanted to ask the question I asked previously. How did you reach the $2 billion number for community college facilities?
Dave Walrath, Coalition. Madam Chair, when we wanted Jenny Hanna to do her testimony at this point, and then we'll respond to your questions, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry to play musical chairs here. So the state bond is at its heart a matter of equity. School facility quality matters in the education process for our students and teachers. The Coalition is proud to support this school bond that will help students and teachers have access to quality school facilities. The state school bond is patterned on the prior 4 successful school bonds that have been approved by California voters since 1998. California's students and teachers need a new state bond to provide matching funds for local school facilities. More than $23 billion in K-12 school facility needs have been identified by the 119 school districts that have already endorsed the 2016 state school bond. There's great need. The LAO has presented the backlog projects that clearly expresses the ongoing need for the state bond. Local funds may be available for some districts, but on their own, those are not sufficient to meet the project's costs. With this state bond, we can fund the financial hardship program that helps low-well school districts and provides allowances for those small school districts without the facility staff to access the program. This is very important as it goes to the heart of the equity issue and parity for all students across the state of California. We find that small and low-well school districts, I'm from Kern County and I represent a number of those, are in need of this level of support. Without a bond, there is no funding for these programs. With the state bond, we can support new career technical education facilities because without state support, fewer will be built. We can also support eligible charter schools to have access to additional funds for their new school construction or modernization. With this bond, we can meet the facility needs of our community colleges that give the primary and first step access to college for our returning veterans and students who cannot afford to be away from home because they need to work and stay close to home for housing. We can, with this bond, provide funding for school districts that have student growth but do not have new development. I have some of those districts in my county, so growth with no development, no access to developer fees. Sufficient to pay the school facilities cost of that new growth. This, too, is an equity problem for the less wealthy Central Valley areas and encouraging urban infill projects. With this state bond, it's an investment for our students and teachers. It will provide new upgraded classrooms to improve learning. Education research is clear on this. Natural lighting, sound acoustics, better air, design modifications do result in improved academic performance. Without this bond, low-well school districts and county office of educations like my own will not have sufficient local bond revenue to look to their local general, and they would look to their local general fund to pay for facilities. This would put pressure on funding that is supposed to improve services for low-income English learners and foster youth. These districts could be forced into the choice of either having an additional teacher or a new classroom, but not both. Without this bond, only the higher property wealth districts across our state can afford to pass local bonds at lower tax rates, will be able to make these investments and improvements for their students and teachers. This will raise the issue of whether the equity requirements of the Serrano decision are being violated to the detriment of students and teachers in lower wealth areas. With this bond, however, will continue the equity provisions of the current program for all students and teachers, regardless of where their families live or where they teach. The Coalition for Adequate School Housing is honored to be part of Californians for Quality Schools and to join with the 119 school districts, State Building and Trades Council, Superintendent Tom Torlickson, California PTA, the Community College League, California Association of Business Officials, California County Superintendent Educational Services Association, a lot of acronyms here, the California School Boards Association, Community College Facilities Consortia, California Chamber of Commerce, and many, many other organizations, as well as elected officials who have endorsed this needed state school bond. I'm surprised Richard didn't bring this up, but every $1 billion of school infrastructure bonds invested in the community creates 13,000 jobs. I am passionate about school facility equity, and this bond will continue a successful partnership between our local school districts and the state to make sure that every student, every teacher has access to equitable facilities in which learning can take place. Thank you for this opportunity to be here, and we're pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Medina, I believe you had a question?
I didn't. Do I need to repeat it?
No need. Dave Walrath, Coalition for Adequate School Housing. The $2 billion for community colleges was based upon a needs analysis that was done in 2014 by the community colleges. I believe it was about 1.8 billion, on the expectation that by the time the bond passed and these things could be implemented over a 4-year period, that the cost would escalate up to about $2 billion. So that is why the $2 billion was selected for community colleges.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, Mr. Hertzberg.
Yeah, you know, I just want you to know I'm asking the hard questions because it's questions of myself. I think we have an obligation to constantly cross-check and course-correct. And Mr. Lyons knows the sleepless nights that we spent in my office in 1998 to make that deal. And the next 2 bond issues were authored by me. And so I question whether I made the right decision, not because it was wrong, but because it's always the appropriate thing to do to scrub this stuff in the most aggressive way possible. So I'm going to be tough, not because I'm against you, but because we all have to be tough on issues that we care about in the interest of the public and the common good. First, you said that improved lighting and all of these things result in academic performance improvements. What data do you have that correlates the improvements in the schools to improvements in academic performance increases beyond a broad statement? We now have over $125 billion of new construction, and if you're saying that that happened, show me the correlation, show these committees the correlation that in fact worked, that we spent our money and received the results that you claim we did.
Oh, Jonathan. Specifically to answer that in the body of research, there is a organization, the San Diego State University holds a body of research that we will be happy to get to the committee with the pertinent data responding to that. There's a large and growing body of evidence that relates to all of those things in terms of educational outcomes.
I'm not a member of these 3 committees, but has performance gone up as a result of this? Have you just seen that? Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, have you seen that?
I don't have the data in front of me, but I can sure tell you that I think when a kid walks into a school every day, the quality of that facility, sets the tone for the day. If there is graffiti everywhere, there's broken down doors, there's roofs with holes in them, it shows that we don't consider education a priority. It may be qualitative, the data I'm presenting to you now, but I can assure you it is true.
As I ask, look again. It probably makes sense, and you're probably right. I'm just trying to ask the tough questions because we're sitting here and discussing housing and the fact that all these kids don't have housing. Would that have been a better use of money to be able to help society you may feel better, but if performance in schools didn't go up, did it affect crime? Did it affect something else? Are we digging deeper on this stuff? We're the legislature of California. Our job is to ask the tough questions and to engage in the deep think, if you will. And all I'm saying is, when you're spending more than $100 billion, I just wanted to scrub this and ask the tough questions, because we should ask it of ourselves, because these are policies that we support, that we've all supported, but we want to make sure that we're achieving the deliverables. Next question is UCs and state university systems. Why did you not put them in this time around?
Dave Walrath again with Coalition for Adequate School Housing. We were under the impression that the administration and the University of California, California State University, had reached an agreement on how their capital needs would be addressed. And because of that impression that we had, we did not want to interfere with whatever the administration might be working out with them.
Okay. I'll take that as its face value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hertzberg. We'll go to Mr. Thurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the chairs. I thank you for the presentation. I've a long time ago I was a school board member, and many of the schools in my district benefited from this program and from the ability of local school districts to bond. And I happened to serve at a school district that ultimately was a very low-income school district, but ultimately bonded $1 billion worth of school construction because the demand for these dollars is so great that there just weren't any dollars left over from the last bond. And we found ourselves with several schools that were seismically unsafe and many schools that needed to be rebuilt. And I appreciate Senator Hertzberg's push to say, if we make the claim that there's academic performance, let's back it up. And I don't think that you can say that by itself, building new facilities improves overall by itself. And we've got to figure out a funding measure to fund what goes on in the classroom to complement what we do outside the classroom. But I have seen interest in newly constructed schools rise and have parents who left the district come back to the districts. And I've seen great interest in having better facilities really drive interest in innovation and technology. I'd like to ask you about that, because what does get me is that at times I still hear students say, we've got a great new school, but we still can't get a good access to the internet. And I think, how do we provide better facilities and make sure that we key in on one of the key ways that we promote student achievement for the future, and that is to make sure that these schools are equipped with top of the line technology opportunities for our students to be successful. And so I'm interested in your thoughts about how the technology components will really be those that will prepare our students for the future, and then just how many units, 3 billion for new and 3 billion for modernization, how many units does that represent for each of those areas?
Well, I'll address, I can't see you, sorry. I'll address the technology question about...
I'm here, I promise.
Okay, I see you now. So that's why we support the Prop 30 extension that can help supplement technology access for our schools. Many of us in education understand the shift in how students are learning now and are addressing our designs to accommodate those technical or technology in our classrooms. And so that's certainly a part of school facilities infrastructure. The second part, I didn't understand your question about units.
The way it breaks out, $3 billion for new construction and then $3 billion for modernization. I'm asking this because I remember applying once to the state program, and they just said we had a backlog. And so I'm wondering, really what I'm wondering is, how long will this get us before we need another bond? And I'm not asking that critically. I just want to know if you could quantify how many new units, new schools could be constructed, and how many schools do you estimate can be modernized for each of those $3 billion allocations?
Assemblymember Thurman, let me start that we hope that this will last 4 years. As the legislative analyst indicated, the amount of growth has been slowing. We still have a significant number of growth in growth districts, which is a strange comment that even though it's flat statewide, you do have school districts that are growing and they need schools. as far as modernization, we have more and more schools that are going over to the 25 years. I cannot give you a really good answer because it depends upon which school is being modernized. Is it a smaller school district or a smaller school that's an elementary school, or is it a 1,500, 2,000 student high school? So it depends upon how local school districts will prioritize their applications on how many will be covered. But the intent was looking at previous rates of expenditure, we would be able to make it about 4 years.